Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jim Wetrich, ACC, 2022 ICF Professional Coaches Global Board of Directors.
Welcome to day 3 of the ICF Global Leaders Forum 2022. It is so fabulous to see people from all over the world with us here today. It's incredible to be able to connect with all of you, and it is my most sincere and great pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you again for a wonderful 2 days of GLF 2022 so far. During day 1, we focused on the topic of engagement. During day 2, we explored the topic of education and growth. And today, for day 3, we'll be focusing on innovation and succession. Today, we will have a lively discussion panel on one of my favorite topics, inclusive leadership, featuring chapter leaders from around the world, engaging in some breakout discussions, some networking, and close with an inspiring keynote on accountability and keeping the promises that we make. The pre-work videos, which can be found on the GLF website under the quote pre-work tab, included 2 panel discussions with our DEIJ task force members. One on the understanding of the common language of DEIJ, and one on creating an inclusive chapter leader mindset. I highly recommend viewing these videos if you haven't done so already. They contain great nuggets of information from this task force that can help you move forward to DEIJ initiatives in your chapters. One of the things that stands out from these panel discussions is that we are not limited by the terms themselves. While DEIJ stands for diversity, equity, inclusive, and justice, it does not mean that we can't include belonging or other ideas into our chapter initiatives. Another point of discussion was that what may be diverse and inclusive for one chapter may not be the same for another chapter or community. It's really what makes the most sense for each chapter. In July of 2020, the ICF Global Board of Directors approved the ICF Statement on Diversity, Inclusion, Belonging, and Justice. Staff and volunteer leaders from ICF's 6 family organizations subsequently co-signed the statement. The statement of principles reflects a position we invite every ICF member, credential holder, and accredited training provider to subscribe to. It includes the statement that, quote, we will place diversity, inclusion, belonging, and justice at the forefront of every decision we make within our association. As we continue the journey toward our vision, we will recommit ourselves to valuing the unique talents, insights, and experiences that every coach and client brings to the world, end of the quote. In January 2022, ICF hired our first DEIJ director, LaKisha, and we are so excited to provide new DEIJ offerings through her critically important work. Before we move on to our programming for the day, just a few quick housekeeping notes. Please use the chat function to share your thoughts during the session today. A number of you have already started to do that. Please be respectful of others and mindful of the ICF Code of Conduct and our core values of professionalism, collaboration, humanity, and equity. Translation is provided during general sessions using Worldly. For breakout rooms and networking sessions, we recommend using Google Translate. The GLF workbook can be found under the live event tab on the GLF website. This workbook is able to be filled out. It's fillable. We recommend the workbook for taking notes and following along with the program. As a coach, it is essential to understand the privilege, advantages, and access that some have to professional coaching while others do not. Therefore, we need to create an equitable space in professional coaching where everyone can access it when needed, shares LaKisha Brooks, our new DEIJ director for ICF. In this panel discussion, we will hear from chapter leaders around the world as they share strategies to raise awareness of DEIJ, how to engage inclusive leaders, and identifying the challenges of implementing DEIJ in various chapters around the world. This panel includes Carolina Garcia, Leslie Schenk, Joy Marie Lawrence, and Viji. Moderating our panel is our new director of DEIJ, LaKisha Brooks. I will turn this over to LaKisha now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jim. And it is a pleasure to be here with all of you all across the world, and a pleasure to be here at ICF. Panelists, please introduce yourselves, your chapter, and your role within a chapter if you are a leader. I will start with Viji.
Hey everyone, this is Vijayalakshmi, also known as Viji. I am the president of ICF Chennai Charter Chapter, and I am a master coach involved in a full-time coaching practice. It's lovely to be here again for week 2 of GLF. I was there on week 1 as a participant. Thank you, LaKisha.
Thank you. Carolina.
Thank you, LaKisha, and hello, everyone. Well, I'm Carolina Garcia. I'm the president of the ICF chapter of Chile. We are in Latin America, and I'm a coach, a PCC coach.
And thank you so much, Carolina. And Joy Marie.
Sawubona. Thank you so much, LaKisha, and I'm excited to be here too. I'm Joy Marie Lawrence. I'm a PCC coach, and I'm based in South Africa from the South African Charter Chapter on the continent of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we will see, has Leslie joined us today? Will Leslie be joining us?
LaKisha, not yet. She hasn't joined, but once she's around, I'll let you know.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. So let's dive into our questions and have a really good discussion today. I will start with Viji. How do you raise awareness for the need to address diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice in a chapter? Viji.
I'd love to say great question, LaKisha. Love this one. So let me just start with something a little personal. I think DEIJ is a theme that we can explore for hours together, and we must. I believe today is the start of a great conversation, and it's just the beginning. So, however, given the limitations of time, I'd like to answer this question with my focus on inclusion. And there's a reason for it, actually 2 reasons. First, inclusive leadership was the original or the topic that I was invited for. So I immediately put up my hand on the panel. And secondly, it's quite close to my heart. And if I may, to the hearts of many of us at ICF Chennai. Let me talk a little bit about what the inclusive approach means. Simply put, I think the inclusive approach is a systemic approach, which means we are part of the whole, and the whole is a part of us. This approach, I think, helps us think beyond a narrow frame of reference and widen our perspective. It's very important to constantly invite not just our members and leaders, but also our stakeholders to consider this power of a systemic approach. And if I may talk for my coaching colleagues and friends from all over, systemic work is something we as coaches increasingly understand as a part of our work. So I think the first point is it's a lot easier to talk and be and understand the systemic approach rather than an inclusive approach, though I think they're pretty much one and the same. Systemic work includes not just doing as we think. So it's not just set of initiatives or activities, but I think it starts with being, and being leading to thinking. It's really 3 layers. And the root of all of it comes from the beingness, like the way it is for coaching as well. So in our being, can we embrace an inclusive mindset? Can you consider the larger whole in all what you do? Coming to awareness again, a simple way of looking at awareness is cognitive, but rarely is awareness cognitive. A lot of awareness comes from our heart space. So I think the first step is to behave and to embody inclusion in all the work we do in the chapter. And call it out and talk about it. So when your stakeholders see that shift in your beingness over a period of time, they see possibilities. They see, systemic as an inclusive, as a regular way of doing work, not just a set of new, shiny new objects that we threw in their way. I think that's a lot easier way. Now, coming to our own chapter, I'd like to talk about our chapter's vision and explain this. I'm quite proud to say it's a very inclusive vision. And you can see, right, I'm lighting up talking about it. GROW is our chapter's vision. And this is about grow coaching, grow chapter, grow coaches, and grow the community. So if you see, it's not just a narrow membership vision, right? Or we're not even looking at ourselves as just a membership organization. And there we connect to the larger ICF, because I read somewhere that ICF is not just a membership organization, but it's a lot more. The entire focus of the 6 family organization structure, etc. So we try to do a little bit of that at the chapter level. And this vision, when we started off, seemed like a really 10,000 feet thing, saying that, can we really grow coaching? Can we actually grow our community? Can we sort of do all of that going beyond our narrow confines? And as we stepped into it, as we kept committing to that vision, it became a lot easier to be inclusive. Everybody had to come in. You couldn't achieve that vision otherwise. And today I can say it with a lot of confidence that most coaches in the chapter, also beyond the ones who come by, the friends, the stakeholders, people who are partners, all of them get grow. And so they see us being very inclusive and taking everyone along. So I think having a common purpose, a vision, is a great starting point to drive an inclusive culture. And of course, none of that will be possible without the support of values. So inclusion is one of the values of our chapter that we've called out. So it's out there on our website. We keep talking about inclusion. So I think we're also thinking, and then we talk. So it's a little bit of a reverse, but that's where I want to be with LaKisha.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Viji. And I love that you said it starts with the mind and behaviors. It's a combination. It's a holistic approach. Thank you for that. So Carolina, well, how do you all raise awareness for the need for this in your chapter?
Well, thank you. I love the vision of Vijay. She's so passionate about when she talks. Well, first of all, we have to talk about the issue here in Latin America. We have to put the conversation over the table. Maybe for some countries that I'm listening now, and some cultures are more aware and more advanced talking about diversity and inclusion. In the case of Latin America, it's like a new topic for us. We have living thinking that our people, it's homogeneous, and pretending that minority groups hardly exist. Just less 10 years ago only, we are talking about gender. 3 years ago, because of a law, we started talking about disability and LGBTQ+ groups. For 4 years, we have been seeing migration crisis in Latin America, but almost we don't talk about race. And at ICF, just talking about diversity and inclusion, thanks to the update of the competency models and the code of ethics, we began opening in talks, in seminars, talking about the importance to put diversity and inclusion in our coaching mindset, because everyone have bias. We have to practice our core competencies and our core values, as Bisha was saying. It's a new mindset for us. So how do I start? I'm with Vija, that how do I start for myself? How do I start in the chapter talking about this, that it's crucial for creating awareness in our coaches, for example.
Absolutely. And I love that you highlighted that, because Jim said it earlier. The diversity need in one chapter may be different than another. You said, hey, in our parts of the world, we're just not tapping to some of the stuff. We're just not even making it known that is an issue here. So thank you, Carolina, for expressing that. I love to hear that. And Jo Marie, what about your chapter? How do you raise the awareness for the need for DEIJ in your chapter?
I'm a human being. See my humanity before you define me. Now, the reason why I say that, we want to raise the awareness of DEIJ. And as ICF professional coaches, the vision is that coaching is an integral part of a thriving society. So DEIJ is definitely on the agenda. We have to raise that awareness if you want to have a thriving society. So it starts with you and me, with each one of us. And I really just want to make 3 observations to answer the question specifically. The first is, it starts with your own curiosity of what you understand DEIJ to be. Are you curious about your own biases, blind spots, shadows? Second of all, for your chapter, is DEIJ a standing item on the agenda, or is it relegated to a subcommittee to deal with? You heard what Jim said earlier on, where DEIJ has been brought through across all the family organizations and how it's going to be examined. So certainly for chapters, be curious about your chapter's context. We learned beautifully about how Vijay explained that what they're doing in their context, and Carolina as well. But certainly when we listened to Penny Hoffman's conversation yesterday, when she used the metaphor of a game of chess, where the queen was context and the king was content, and you want to make sure that the king stays alive, make sure we understand the context of the applicability of DEIJ for your particular chapter, and then make that content relevant to address some of those challenges and opportunities. And then certainly be culturally curious in your chapter around what needs to happen. And then the third aspect I would highlight as well is certainly collaborate with other chapters. There's 142 chapters out there. And as we've heard, there are opportunities to collaborate around regions, around interest groups, around perhaps languages, around disability that Carolina spoke about. Perhaps there are chapters that want to explore inclusivity. Go and have a conversation with Vijay to see how are they dealing with it as well. So that's how we can start to raise the awareness of DEIJ in our chapters. So my invite to each of you is, what of what I said will you take back to your chapter, and who will you share it with? Thank you, Lynn.
I love that. And it seems we have a common theme here, is that what works for one chapter may not work for the other. But if you see the commonality, if you see an opportunity for collaboration, work with other chapters, reach out to other chapters. Even with me, I had someone reach out to say, come work with us in Singapore. We have to start working together to see there's a commonality amongst a lot of our chapters. Thank you so much for that. We'll go with our second question here. How do you engage your chapter leaders and members to explore opportunities to make your chapter more diverse and inclusive? For this, we will start with Carolina.
Thank you, LaKisha. We have to create an awareness, and as I said, put the topic over the table. Then look at our leaders and our own members. How are we made up? Men, women, ages, for example. In Chile, we have different regions of the country, despite the fact that everything is more concentrated in the capital. In the other hand, the profession is branded as elitist, and in our country, and being a stable member of the chapter is a value that some coaches are not willing to take. So we have to make a diagnosis where I'm making diagnostics and focus group to have more information from our own members and from the stakeholders. Then we are willing to create a strategy to keep the issue going and more awareness and talking about more opportunities. How do we engage those people that can't access to coaching? We have profound social values in our chapter, so we have programs of coaching, for example, for migrants with members, volunteers, for example, to create that we are very diverse, and we have the honor to be coaches, and we want to give more of us, maybe in that way.
Absolutely. The really important thing I heard there, amongst a lot of the great things that you said, was getting information from your stakeholders and members, asking them, getting data from them is important in engaging what they need. Thank you for that, Carolina. And Jo Marie, how do you engage your chapter leaders and members to explore these opportunities?
I just want to absolutely build on Carolina's last point about, we coaches, so let's practice active listening and really invite our members and coaches to understand what they are doing around diversity, inclusiveness. I mean, they might be ahead of the game, they might be doing things that they can bring into the chapter as well. So it's about seeing your members as a resource and then providing that platform that's more inclusive for them. So don't assume there's no capability amongst the coaches. We just might not be aware of it. I just also like to relate the story in South Africa. Many years ago, we had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was chaired by the then Desmond Tutu. And it provided a platform for people to really speak their truth in terms of what had happened. And it created a great platform and a meaningful platform for people to explore deep and meaningful and painful experiences. But what we didn't do very well was the reconciliation part. In other words, how do we make it possible to collectively move forward, to hold each other accountable? And I think there are lessons that can be learned from that when it comes to creating opportunities for chapters to be more inclusive and diverse. So it's about not just creating the platforms for we to talk about it, but also how do we heal? How do we move on from that? And so I'd like to just share a couple of practical initiatives that we've been doing in South Africa that we could share with everyone else. You can raise your hand or just smile, but ICF Global, for example, has great resources on the extranet. So where you can go in and find and learn from other chapters. But I guess specifically from a South African perspective, one of the key things is, as a chapter, set a bold strategic direction with integrity and accountability. In fact, in the pre-work, there's a great talk by Linda McLaughlin and Catherine Tunnell around managing chapter boards, and the dynamics of boards, which gives you great insight into that. In South Africa, we also use the International Coaching Week, where we raise specific debate and discussions around issues of diversity, social impact, what's happening. We've used initiatives like writing circles, which are hosted by the chapter, for people to write thought leadership articles and use a creative writing and a reflection space to be able to do it. In the South African chapter, they've also had regional chapter triads, and this was driven by Svea van der Hoorn, where we've had the Philippines, Nigeria, and South Africa come together, and you have coaches peer coach each other around DEIJ initiatives to learn and engage. There's also opportunities which we've done where you look at local cultural and national holidays. So for us in South Africa, Women's Day, Human Rights Day are great pivoting points to have chapter initiatives where we can discuss these particular ones. And then the other one that's been quite popular is also just having open spaces. You know, we don't always have to tell our coaches, have an open space where we can listen, where the coaches can come and share the examples of what they've been doing, perhaps what they'd like to see being done. And really, that's also an opportunity to find volunteers like myself, to find future ambassadors in how we're doing it. And then something else that's been done quite extensively in the chapter is also we've got an ethics webinar, which is done once a month, where we go through the standards. And by the way, you know, standard 28, in other words, our responsibility to society. DEIJ is a good way for chapters to bring that responsibility to society alive through these kinds of initiatives as well. And then if you don't have any ideas for your own chapter, I would invite you to go and explore ICF Foundation. You can go and do any of those Ignite initiatives, or, you know, be part of exploring coaching for social impact. There are projects that any of the chapters can enjoy. And may I just leave you with this quote from Desmond Tutu: "Do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world." So my invite to you is, how will you engage with your members to create those opportunities for little bits of good that we can overwhelm the world with? Thank you, LaKisha.
Thank you, Jo Marie. And you had a diverse list of different ways to engage your members and have opportunities as well. So hopefully everyone out there was taking notes of what you were doing. It was an insightful list. Thank you so much for sharing. And Viji, what does your chapter do to engage chapter leaders and members to explore these opportunities?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I will also talk about the larger ecosystem, because somewhere I think in the chapter, we've just stopped defining the lines, you know, with members. It's very powerful. It's a very different way of looking at ourselves, almost so much that our identity itself, sometimes we wonder, you know, who are we really? But that apart, you know, I'd like to refer to this, I don't know whether it's a quote or I read somewhere, but, you know, it stayed with me for a very long time when I was learning the nuance between diversity and inclusion. Diversity is inviting everyone to the party. Inclusion is, you know, for everyone to feel comfortable enough to get onto the dance floor to dance. And I think this has been one of our guiding sort of principles. We don't just want to open out ICF Chennai and the work we do, etc., to everyone. Yes, that's important. You know, the represented, underrepresented, non-represented, you know, the strong voices, the weak voices, the ones without the voices. But also make it comfortable enough for everybody to feel, hey, Chennai is home. And I know I'm sort of making, you know, rather provocative statement here, but why can't the chapter be home to everyone is a thought that always plays in our mind. So one of the things, favorite lines that we like to refer to often is, you know, we call ourselves Namma Chennai. Namma means our, but the our is not meant to be our in the sense of, you know, inward, right? So one of our favorite lines is, everyone is welcome to ICF Chennai, or everyone is welcome to Namma Chennai. And we don't just say this, it's not just a statement, but really part of the culture that I think you'll sense when, you know, you just come into any of our spaces. And this has not been easy, right? To you know, because you're sort of holding on to your own identity, but also allowing for other identities to enrich your own identity. But I think when we celebrate this culture, when we acknowledge behaviors in this direction, it only grows bigger and bigger. It has a cascading effect. So nobody's sort of holding a flag and saying we need to do this, but it's almost like you walk into the space, there's like some 5-6 people, ready to sort of welcome you and make you feel comfortable, and they sort of take charge. And it's just very nice to watch that unfold. Again, when you look at some of the ways, and I take inspiration from what Joy Marie had shared, I think this approach led us to come up with some creative, innovative forums for connection. One of that is All Things Coaching. We call it ATC, which launched last month, which is basically a space, an open space that is created for anyone to come with any question on coaching. So there's no good question, bad question. There's no silly question. And this is not just for coaches, right? People who don't know anything about coaching, people who want to become coaches, people who want to hire a coach, everybody is welcome there. And, there's nobody sort of, being the expert. Everyone is an expert. So we co-create, we genuinely make an attempt to make everybody part of it. In fact, tomorrow is the next ATC March edition. I'd invite everyone to just drop by and see how that feels and give us feedback. The other one that we started off was something called, Coaches Coffee Connect, where, coaches come together, again, like an open space what Joy Marie had shared. But what's interesting is with every passing connect, we're realizing that we have as many regulars from who are not part of the chapter, as many as the regulars who come from the chapter. So suddenly, there's this comfort, there's this knowing each other, there's like people who are the regulars coming in, and then boom, you realize they're not even formally part of your chapter. And that is exactly what we want, because we can't move towards the ICF vision doing this alone. I think, like they say, you need a village to raise a child, right? It takes a huge community to raise a chapter and to grow a chapter, if we can take this approach. There's one more thing I definitely need to share, which was a huge learning for us last year. Last year, our chapter hosted the ICF India Conclave, an experience that allowed all of us to learn and grow through very difficult times, because this was at the time of the second wave and things like that. And, where even a conference sort of didn't make sense at a point of time. But I think we were able to successfully complete it, because we collaborated with other India chapters. But I think more importantly, the way we positioned the conclave. It was not about the great speakers who came or the topics we had or anything, but I think this, whole ecosystemic approach, right? So the conclave itself was positioned as a unique coming together of the coaching ecosystem to create coaching awareness, to clarify this, haze around coaching, make it accessible. Everyone can understand, right? Whether you're a homemaker, you're a student, you're a veteran, or you're a corporate executive, you're welcome. We made it a pro bono conclave, absolutely at no charge. It cost us a lot of money. That was a call we took as a chapter. We're not going to make money on this conclave. Everything need not be commercial. But if this is truly an inclusive activity, let's throw it open for those who can't afford it. And there are so many people out there who could not afford a ticket, but they still came by. And I think that diversity, that inclusiveness is what really made us feel so proud of the way we ran it. Last but not the least, our speakers, who usually speakers are external people, right? They come and they sort of do their bit and go away. But they co-created this with us because not one of them charged us for the conclave. And we had some of the world's best because they knew our larger vision. They knew our larger intent behind this conclave. They flexed for us. They helped us. It was amazing to see that kind of co-creation at one of the largest global conclaves that we ran. And, just to say that, I think taking that inclusive and systemic approach is probably the way to do anything, whether it's regular work, business as usual, or a large event like a conclave that you do once in many, many years.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I want to talk about some of the challenges. We talked about a lot of great things that you all are doing and implementing or planning to do. Joy Marie, talk to me about what are some of the biggest challenges to implementing DEIJ initiatives in a chapter or in the coaching world in general?
Start with recognizing the humanity in each person. When we want to talk about initiatives, it sometimes can be a very uncomfortable subject. Oh no, not quite sure what to talk about. we spoke about earlier, what's a DEIJ initiative in my chapter might be different in a different chapter. Instead of looking for the things that are common. So if we approach it that I'm going to see the humanity in the other person, I'm going to go with an approach of active listening and having a conversation from a point of curiosity. We allow ourselves to come into the space without heaviness of the baggage of bias and judgment that comes in, that often closes the opportunity to have a conversation as well. And so supports of having embodied engagements. I mean, this DEIJ is something we need to talk about. Yes, we can watch panel conversations like we're having right now, later on in the comfort of our homes. But when you actually are part of the conversation, when afterwards, like this one, we go away and we have a breakout room and you can actually ask questions about it, that creates an embodied experience of what it means to be tackling and having conversations about DEIJ. So I'm always curious, and I'm appreciative having gone last week to GLF in that particular time zone. But even like today, how many people in New York and LA are awake at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning to come and sit and listen to the conversations and the perspectives of DEIJ from, coaches from, from Africa and from the East at this kind of things. So some of the challenges, I would say, is just that awareness of recognizing the humanity before we start the labels of DEIJ, and the curiosity to want to listen and get involved. And I'll pause for that moment now.
Thank you so much. And Viji, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see implementing DEIJ in a chapter?
Yeah, this is a great question too, LaKisha, because like I said, while I was talking about it, I think doing things like this can be daunting. And I realize all of us are chapter leaders here, so it's okay to be vulnerable. And yeah, you sometimes wonder. But I think in my experience, trying to passionately do some work in this area, largely inclusion and diversity, I think there are a couple of challenges. And I'll just talk about them quickly. The first one is the concept of boundaries and rules. I think the biggest challenge to inclusion is boundaries. When you metaphorically also, when you build a boundary around yourself, how can you allow for inclusion? And it's interesting, it's also a bit of a paradox here, because when you talk organization, there is an innate sense of boundary. So chapter has its own boundary, its rules, its sort of regulations, who can be a member, who can't be a member. It's important, right, from a governance stand. And yet these boundaries could itself be barriers. Let me talk about with a small example. Last week in GLF, there was a great session which was following the one about how do we involve Gen Z and our sort of youth, the younger, the future, the leaders in our chapter work. How do we listen to them? How do we hear their voices, etc.? So one of the ideas that I spoke about, and some other chapters are also considered, was the idea of student memberships, which means that somebody who is a student, we bring them in as a member and as a voice of the chapter. Yeah, hear their voice as well. That's inclusion. That's inclusion, right? Now the point is, there are rules which say that to become a member or even an associate, right? You need to be a coach in training at least. And for students that age, at least from where I come, coach training is exorbitant. So it's a little bit of a situation we're in. We want to invite all these people in, but there are certain rules which we're not able to flex around and get those voices in. So that's just one example, right? Now, one way to look at it is say, hey, let's make accessible coach training for anybody who's a student, right? This is again a 10,000 feet kind of idea. How do we do it is the question, right? The next one is accessibility, and somewhat connected to the first, right? Now, some of this can be, like we speak about coaching being accessible. I think becoming a coach also, right? Coach training, and anyone today can't become a coach. For example, the economic barriers are quite high. And what a lot of the new members who say, right, who've taken up coaching as a second career or jumping straight into it, shutting down everything they've done, We all know in the initial few years, you don't make that kind of money. You barely survive. So there is again a situation, because we want these voices and we want these younger coaches, not necessarily by age, but by experience and qualification in the room, to really give us that perspective, to make us more well-rounded, to build in more empathy. But they simply say, again, coming from my part of the world, that the dollar fee is just way too much. I don't even make that kind of money. So again, a situation. How do we work around that? How do we get these people who we really need them to be in there to be part of the chapter? So we, for example, came out with an innovation of an associate category, right? Which is a very differentiated category, but we try our level best not to seemingly make any differences between them and members, right? It's very hard, because there are certain times they realize they don't have all the benefits, which we cannot give them because they're not members. Again, there are rules. And yet you need to feel them so included that they will come and tango with you, right? Again, a challenge. The third one, and I call this inclusive exclusion. And stay with me for a minute. I know it's conceptual. This is about when we try to create inclusion, when we bring in more people into the family, right? The initial family that was there, or the initial set, does not feel exclusive enough, does not feel special enough. So one of the challenges in going beyond our members and sort of taking care of everyone and supporting everyone, etc., is sometimes members really wonder, so what's the extra that I am getting because I'm a member of this chapter? And if we don't do that, we won't be inclusive. So there is an inclusive exclusion that sort of happens. Not a huge problem, but it just means there's a lot more we need to do in different ways to keep our sort of leaders and members, to change the narrative and say that, hey, you're part of this, right? I mean, you're sort of the host of the party, you're not the guest. But it takes effort. I just want to say one thing before handing over the mic back to you, LaKisha, is diversity and inclusion can both be very challenging, and let me say this boldly, inconvenient. Yeah. And staying committed can be very hard. But then, whoever said doing right is easy? That's the thought I want to leave you with this question.
Awesome, thank you. And Carolina, very quickly, I want to hear from you, and I want you to talk to us about the biggest challenge. I know you talked a little bit about it earlier, about understanding the different areas of diversity, but what are some other challenges that you face when trying to implement diversity into your chapter?
I love what Vijay brings to us of exclusion and inclusion. For us, one of the big challenges are how to create awareness, as I were talking, and how to deliver inclusive leadership that we have been talking about this. First, commitment. We as leaders, we have to commit to be committed to diversity and inclusion, because it's our own goal aligned with the goals of the chapter, of the chapter, and believe in the business case of diversity, equity, and inclusion, a combination of emotion and intellect, respectively. Second, as we were talking, courage. Challenging the status quo or ongoing against the norms invites to vulnerability of a leader who is practicing courage. Another extension of a highly inclusive leader. Feedback is also a component of courage and should be sought and provided on a regular basis. In LATAM, we're not used to give feedback only when a complaint arrives. So we have to begin asking for feedback. Third, as my partner says, bias awareness. Inclusive leaders are self-aware and aware of their environment and how it affects themselves and others. Subtle bias from stereotype and confirmation and groupthink can narrow a leader's vision and reduce objective decision-making. So we have to do the work on us and show the importance of this, not because we are coaches, we know our bias and we were aware. And then curiosity, employ an open mind and assess the competency model, this that brings the coach model. We have to decide to understand how others experience the world. Be tolerant to ambiguity. Well, and then collaboration. How to collaborate with other chapters? We are very used to collaborating between LATAM chapters. We appreciate each other, we take care, we make a mini community. It is easy for us, collaboration among similars. It's always easy, but with collaboration with other chapters from other places, we can find great opportunities. There is a challenge for us that not many leaders or members speak English. And the other thing, as Vijay say, maybe the accessibility. The accessibility in terms for people that are blind, maybe. How are we having our webpage? I was thinking when she mentioned accessibility, I know that it was in other terms, but then began to me accessibility for all disabilities. How are we going to them? So I think we have a lot of challenges.
Absolutely, and thank you all so much. Unfortunately, we won't get to the last question, but I will ask each of our panelists to give just a little nugget, just a one word, one sentence nugget for our guest today as to inclusive leadership in chapters. I'll start with Joy Marie. Just that one word or nugget for our guest today.
DEIJ is a wicked problem. Like poverty, no panacea is going to solve it. We need to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable in how we deal with it. My humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together. And I'm quoting Desmond Tutu. Thank you very much.
I love that quote. Thank you so much. Carolina, that last minute word or statement for the audience.
A little more than what I've been talking about is we need to talk about this topic. We have to put this diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice that it's new for LATAM over the table. Begin spreading the word. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Last minute word, Viji?
Yeah, my last words will be on this. Commit, innovate, but one step at a time. And be courageous and infinitely patient.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining us for this panel. And now I will hand it off.
LaKisha, thank you so much. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you, Joy Marie, and thank you, Viji. That was absolutely fabulous. I could let you ladies go on for hours. I know everyone found great value in that. Some just fabulous pearls. You know, I think our potential, we're talking a lot about being human. I think our potential is only limited by our vision. And we just have to live that vision and attack these problems as opportunities. So thank you all. We're now going to transition into small group breakout room sessions to discuss the following two things. One, what methods are you and your chapter using to implement DEIJ in your chapters? And the second thing is, what are some draft ideas for DEIJ initiatives that you can take back to your chapters? These questions can be found in your GLF workbook and will also be shared with you in the chat. They're on the screen right now. Make sure to identify a group leader in your group who will be responsible for reporting out key learnings when we return to the main room, and we will return to the main room in about 15 minutes or so. So have a great time in your breakout rooms, and we'll see you in a little while. Welcome back. Welcome back. Let's hear from a few of our breakout group leaders on the key learnings from their group discussion. Please welcome Kathleen Lee Honda, Program Director for Strategic Initiatives for the ICF Foundation, who will assist me with these report outs. Raise your hand, please. You can see it probably on your lower screen there if you're not familiar with that. Raise your hand to be called on, and please keep these brief. Group leaders, please also add key learnings from your group to the chat, if you would, please.
Thank you so much, Jim. So I already see Svea. Svea, over to you, please.
Thank you, Kathleen, and everyone here. We had a conversation which connected North and South between South Africa, Tunisia, Iceland, and Chile. And just briefly, what came out were these are possibilities around question 1, is methods of expression. The possibility of allowing members to use art, music, drama, cartoons, not just words of conversations. So just the question of how do we encourage our members to express themselves? And then another learning was about if you do use translation, the importance of the quality of the translation needs to be at the level that matches the kind of nuanced language that coaches often use. It can't be transactional translation. So translation services in and of themselves are not necessarily as simple as we might think. And then one other thing to say is Iceland has something to tell us all about being part of a thriving society, because they have a country population of about 1/3 and they have 80 chapter members, which is far bigger than any of the other countries, even though we might have more members. If you look at the ratio between the country population and the size of the chapter, Iceland are doing something that I think we could perhaps learn from. So those are some of our key learnings.
Wonderful, Svea. I really like the idea around creativity, using picture or ideas that will help people interact more with the idea of diversity. Thank you so much. Rosangela, over to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm from Brazil, and our group, we were from Washington, D.C., Greece, and Colombia. It was a great discussion. It will be hard to explain everything, but I brought an experience we have here in Brazil. An international company hired my business school to work with Black leaders. And they asked us to bring Black coaches, and the professors should be all of them Blacks. It was the first time that we faced in ICF in my chapter to try to bring Black coaches. It was hard to find. We found some, but it was very interesting because the subject came into our table. And another thing that we discussed to be a very good coach, we spend a lot of money. The good schools are expensive. The girl from Colombia told this, and it's interesting. And even to take part in ICF is very expensive when we think about our current rate. We pay 5 more than who earns in dollars. So one way of being inclusive, receiving young generation of coaches or people that are in a poor society culture should be ICF and us have a way to partner, to support them financially, or to have a difference in the value, because then we can help them to achieve this place in the world being a very good coach. So I think it's the main theme we have discussed.
Thank you so much, Rosa. And I just wanted to highlight that ICF Foundation is also working on including people who are less financially privileged. I know coaching training can be very expensive, and you're very right. So we are starting out a scholarship program that will really benefit, such underrepresented regions. So definitely, I'd like to partner with you, as ICF Foundation, discuss more around this and see how we can be able to work together in this. So thank you for raising that up. Any other thoughts from the team group?
We've got time maybe for one more comment, and then we will take about a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 20 minutes after the hour. So anybody have any last minute comments?
Joy Marie, over to you.
Thank you. Just something we also discussed in our group, which was Slovakia, Panama, and Guatemala and South Africa, is that for some of the chapters that are relatively new to the DEIJ conversation is to draw a map or create a map. So it's a visual map of contacts of people in the ICF ecosystem and understanding where the relevant materials are on the particular topic. So there's great information on the extranet, on the ICF website. So for the chapters, when they want to lean in and connect with other chapters on issues of language or ageism or how they deal with these kinds of things, you can then create and build this map of who to contact in the ecosystem to support the chapter. And that's something that you can just leave behind and build on for future chapters as well. So it's just a little practical suggestion. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joy, for highlighting that. Jim, over to you, please.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, everyone. It was such a fabulous conversation.